Hi everyone, my name is Natalie. Today I wanted to finally do the catch-up wrap-up that I've talked about in the last few videos and that I have procrastinated doing because there's a lot of books to get through. I actually looked up the previous catch-up wrap-up that I'd done and realized that I'm wearing the same sweater. I'm not going to change it because I love it, and this sweater is knitted in Norwegian wools. It's very warm and I was feeling cold, so we're gonna leave it, but I was looking to see which book I left off with last time. So we have about 28 books to get through today. Let's just get started and we'll see how long we're here. So I'm gonna go in the order that I read them in, so hopefully my thoughts are clearer the nearer we come to the present day. So the first one I have is Madicken by Astrid Lindgren. I don't know if this has an English translation, I don't know if this has an English title, but it's one of the ones set in the turn of the century. I think it's supposed to be set around the late 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. It's about Madicken, who is, I feel like she's 10 years old or something, and it's her adventures with her younger sister in the little village where they live. I find Madicken to be very charming. I love the setting of it. There's a lot of cozy Christmas themes in the movie adaptations as well. I have just been intending to read through Astrid Lindgren's body of work, and this was the one that I got through to this year and this summer. It was especially fun to read this closely after reading the biography on Astrid Lindgren. I don't really recall anything in particular about the book. I have already watched the movie adaptations, but I enjoyed the book, and the audiobooks in Swedish is also narrated by Astrid Lindgren herself. So I definitely recommend, but I wouldn't say that this book in particular has stood out in my memory, but I'm really glad to have checked off another one of her books. Then we have Arrangements in Blue by Amy Key. So this book I was really excited about because it's sort of set out to be a book about living alone as I think she's in her 30s. So I was hoping that there would be a celebration of being alone, doing things on your own, all of the things that you can gain from that kind of life. It is that, but it's also a lot about the loss, the sense of loss that she has, the sense of missing out on, in particular, relationships, romantic life, and not necessarily having a partner in the sense of having a romance, although there is that as well, but also I think ultimately it's about having a life partner and sharing your life with someone, and all of the ways that adds to your life, all of the like the practical ways that it adds, just having that kind of person to carry your burdens with you. I think that is central to this book, and while I appreciated the honesty in Amy Key's writing on her life and coming to terms with what her life has ended up being, kind of slightly different from what she expected and hoped, there was just, I hoped that there would have been more celebration, because I feel like that is why I was drawn to this book, to see, like, there are certain sections, like when she's talking about traveling alone. I love that. Having your own house and using your own space in the way that you want. Those were fantastic, but also having friends that create that celebrate your life with you, that are present in your important moments, to help create milestones with you. A lot of those things I also took away from this book, so I would still recommend it if it sounds of interest to you, but I was slightly disappointed for what I was hoping it would be. Then we have another kind of disappointment, and that is Fair Play, I think is the English translation of the title. It's Rent Spel by Tove Jansson. So this is a book about two women living together in their life on the island. It is very obviously autobiographical. Tove Jansson lived with her female partner, whose name I can't think of at the moment, on an island. So if you kind of want the memoir aspect of this story, you would pick up Notes of an Island. I'll put a picture of the cover on the screen as well. So I like the concept of this book, but I didn't feel connected to it, and I was kind of disappointed in that. And I don't know if I could pinpoint what I was missing, but there was just something that no spark for me, which I found in all of her other writings. Like, I love The Summer Book. I love the True Deceiver. I love her short stories. But I just did not love this book, and I think there was a sense of melancholy, there's a sense of gloom in this book that didn't necessarily balance out with positive, optimistic, or humoristic moments. So I think the tone was a bit more of a downer than I was expecting, and also felt like a different style to her other books. All of them have had both the sort of the celebration of life as well as the darker sides of life, and I think this left a more sour taste in my mouth, if that makes sense. So I don't know how I feel about this one. I might just have been in a mood when I read it, but that is how I felt about it and what has lingered as well over the course of the rest of the year. The next one I have is called Kattvinden. It's written by Helena Öberg and illustrated by Kristin Lidström. Yes. This I don't think has any English translation yet. I hope it will get one. It was fantastic. So it's a middle grade book told both through illustrations and through writings. It's similar to Hugo Cabret, the style of it. I think it's a young girl who moves into this house and sort of goes investigating into the presence that is still existing there, and digging into the mystery of this haunted house. I was emotional reading it. I was very invested. It was beautifully done, told through both the writing and the illustrations. So if you can read in Swedish, I would strongly recommend it. I don't even think it's in Swedish in print anymore, which is a true shame because it's so fantastic. Then I have a few picture books. I'm gonna go quickly through them because I don't have anything to show you. I'll put at least the covers on the screen. The first one is The Skull by John Klassen. I just picked this one up on a whim because I saw that the library had recently got it. I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. I think the atmosphere of it was nice, but it just didn't really click with me, and the same way that it has for other people. So yeah, I think the illustrations were beautiful. The atmosphere and especially the darkness and sort of shadows is what I enjoyed the most. But the story itself, I didn't necessarily love, or I felt like I didn't connect with this in any particular way. The next one I have is The Queen in the Cave by Julia Sarda. I love her illustrations. I think the intricateness of them is just spectacular. The detail-oriented style of her illustrations are wonderful. And especially I feel very nostalgic because a lot of the picture books that I enjoyed as a kid were really detailed, and I remember just looking at pictures for ages and discovering new details every time. I think this book and the story as well captures the sense of nostalgia really well. The sense of storytelling and creating bigger stories based on very small details as a kid. Just having that imagination. So it's a beautifully illustrated book, a fun story, but again, it wasn't something that hit me emotionally very much. The next one is Granny and Bean by Karen Hesse. This was beautiful, but I I pretty much forgot what I've pretty much forgotten what this was about, except for a child and their grandmother, I think, just walking along the beach and observing what's there. This one didn't really work for me. But the next one was wonderful. It's called What Do You See When You Look at a Tree by Emma Carlisle. And this was my favorite of the picture books. It is all about discovering the wonder of trees. And if you know me, you know I love nature writing, so it was already a given that I would enjoy the premise of this book. But it was just wonderful. I would strongly recommend. I think it was published in some kind of collaboration with Kew Gardens. So definitely get this one for the nature lover kids in your life or for yourself. The last one of the picture books I have is Vendog by Mikołaj Pasinski and illustrated by Gosia Herba. And again, this was one that I enjoyed. I liked the style of this in particular. The illustration style was what drew me to it. But again, it was one that I enjoy, but that won't stick with me over time and really hasn't. I don't really know what the story of this one was about, except for remembering the very detail-oriented painting style. But of the picture books, I would particularly recommend What Do You See When You Look at a Tree? And then I have been rereading Nana with Oliver. I'll put a link to his channel in the description. We read both Nana volume 3 and 4 and 5, I think. Yes. And I've been really enjoying that reread. Nana is one of my favorite manga series of all time. It's created by Ai Yazawa. It is about two women living together. They share a house, and one of them is one of them is trying to find a job that she loves and has just broken up with her boyfriend, and she's kind of struggling with her ordinary life. And then the other one is in a rock band, and she has a more kind of colorful style of life. And it's a lot about friendship in between these two women, and they are very, very different in all ways, like in style and personality, but they have this particular bond, and it's about friendship, and I love it. So there's that. Then we have Loveless by Alice Osman, and this has to be one of the most enjoyable books I've read this year, because it's about a girl or a woman who discovers that she's asexual, and it's a college coming of age story. It's about friendship again. I don't remember what the character is called, but she moves into her college with her two friends she's very close with, and they all have their own struggles getting accustomed to this new life and this new phase of their lives, and they make new friends. Their friendship is put to the test in many different ways, but it's ultimately about this protagonist discovering her sexuality, and through all of the trials and tribulations getting there. It was really, really fun. If you enjoy coming of age stories, if you enjoy college stories, I think you would enjoy this. I just appreciated this one so much, and I felt very, very invested, completely into it, and it also made me realize that I could enjoy YA if it's the right kind of book for me. So definitely one of my favorites of the year, and we'll talk more about it probably in my favorite books video. Then we have A Study in Scarlett by Arthur Conan Doyle, and I also read The Sign of Four by him. These are the first two Sherlock Holmes books. I reread them. I was really in the mood for revisiting Sherlock Holmes, and reading them through the audiobooks narrated by Stephen Fry, which I love. Stephen Fry is such a fantastic person to narrate these books, and you can tell that he really loves these stories as well when he's narrating them. It's also fun with the audiobooks because he has some kind of introduction before each of the books. And I really enjoy hearing some of the history regarding Arthur Conan Doyle as well as Stephen Fry's relationship towards these books. I remember in particular, I think it's in the beginning of The Sign of the Four, where he talks about Arthur Conan Doyle's relationship with Oscar Wilde and how they were really good friends. Really enjoyed the reread. These are fun books. I don't love the first two. I think Studying Scarlett is important because of Sherlock and Watson meeting for the first time. The first half of the book is enjoyable. I don't love the background story to the actual crime and the case. I don't think it's the best constructed, but I enjoy seeing the meeting of these two characters. And then in The Sign of the Four, we have another important character being introduced. So it's important for the canon and for the story in overall. The earlier stories, you can tell that he was really into sort of Western stories, and he's very... The cases are very like large in terms of global scope as well as the kind of crime. It's very intricate and very complicated with a lot of characters involved, whereas I prefer when they're more down to earth. So and you do get that in the short stories in particular, and The Hound of Baskerville is of course more of a gothic story, which I enjoy much more. So was happy to reread them, but they are not my favorite in the series by any stretch. Then I read A Lion in the World by Dorthe Nors. I actually read the Swedish translation of this, En linje i världen. And this is a memoir. It's about her traveling along the coast of Denmark. And it's really beautiful nature writing. There's a lot of writing on memory and the memory that is carried in the land, the way that the land is sort of shaped by different lives and different times. It's a lot about environmental change and climate change and erosion of cliffs and that kind of thing. It's about storytelling and the way that we remember these physical places and the histories of the people that has lived in these places and inhabited them and become part of it. So it's kind of interweaving a lot of the things that I enjoy. I love writing on memory and nature and storytelling and language. So definitely a lot of overlap in my particular interests. This isn't necessarily a groundbreaking book in any way, but I really enjoy the quiet company of Dorthe Nors, especially because I was reading it in the late parts of summer and early weeks of the autumn. And it was just the perfect book to read through the transition of the seasons and that sense of the summer ending and that being kind of slightly melancholic. Then I read Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, which was my start on the queer romance reading. I've only read this one and I'm currently reading one of her other books, so I haven't read much romance this year. It's just because I've been reading them for a while now, the other one. But Red, White and Royal Blue, I'm sure everyone has heard of before, but it's about the president's son falling in love with the Prince of England, and the romance is facing a lot of hindrances, a lot of challenges because they're from completely different worlds. It's a kind of romance that is doomed to be problematic in many ways, and they also have very different personalities, very American, very British, so the combination of their lifestyles and their upbringings and everything is all of the culture clashes, but it was just so fun. Like, I watched the movie adaptation in, I want to say in August, and I hadn't read this book, but then I saw someone's review of this, and they were talking about the differences, and I thought I might as well give the audiobook a try from the book and get more of this story. So I read it and realized that I was missing out so much. More flirting, more sort of building up to them becoming interested in each other. There's more time to sense the chemistry, as well as more time for them to start trusting each other, to share more intimate thoughts and details, and be more vulnerable. There's much more build up is basically the difference, and I really enjoyed this. I was laughing, I was completely invested. This is one of those books that I stop doing other things in order to just keep reading. Then I read Long Live the Posthorn by Vigdis Hjorth. This was translated by Scarlett and I read this together with Amelia. I'll put a link to her Instagram in the description. This is about a woman who works for a PR agency thing. The closer we get to her, the more we see that she's been kind of stuck in her life. I think she's in her 30s, and she's in a relationship that she's been in for a few years. She doesn't seem happy, and she doesn't seem to be communicating with her partner much. She works every day and just keeps being in this loop of working, and everything's very automatic. It's not, it doesn't seem that she's present in anything. There doesn't seem to be anything that sort of breaks off the mundaneness and the monotony of the everyday. But then one of her colleagues dies, and that becomes a kind of catalyst for her to change her life and to start to really look closely at what her life is and how she might want to change it. I really enjoyed the way that it reflected loneliness and the detachment and the sense of being lost in your life and not being quite sure how you got there, but just kind of slowly waking up from a sense of being in a fog, and the way that it explores the sense of a slow awakening and how it takes time for other people to see it, how it takes her sudden passion for this project where she is working for the postal service and their rights, the worker rights there, and she becomes so so engaged and so involved in their cause because it's exactly what she needs. It was very engaging, and I also really enjoyed discussing this with Amelia. I think that also added a lot to my enjoyment of this. So definitely will be reading more Vigdis Hjorth in the next year. It was a good, solid introduction to her work. The next one I have is The Lost Pianos of Siberia by Sophia Roberts. I read this together with Oliver from the Chaotic Bibliophile, and we read this one in Nonfiction November. We read it and checked in every single day, and so I have very fond memories of reading this book. It's kind of the premise of the book is that it's a history of pianos in Siberia, and it's that and much more. So the music aspect of this is actually quite, it's not, I wouldn't say it's necessarily central to the book. She is traveling through Siberia, both physically and through stories. Some places she isn't able to actually visit. But there's so many interesting stories in this book, and she captures the lives of so many people that you are completely captivated by their stories and so thankful that someone caught them and retold them through this book. There are stories of people who have built pianos, who have kept them, who are tuners. Some of these people have been working with pianos through generations. Some of them just happen to have a connection with the piano very indirectly. There's just a sense of curiosity and a sense of a genuine interest in people that I really got on with. I loved her mentality throughout this book, and you can really see the way that what she brings with her when she's traveling, what a difference it makes. What a difference it makes in the reception, that people are so willing to help her, they're so willing to share their stories because they find someone who is genuinely wanting to hear about them. So definitely it's a standout of the reading year. It's everything I want a travel book to be. Then we get to my Heartstopper phase. So I've read volume 1, 2, and 3, and I am currently reading volume 4. So I'm probably gonna finish this today, possibly. The Heartstopper series is by Alice Osman. It's a graphic novel series. I'm sure no one has missed that this series exists. I came to this one through the TV show first. So the TV adaptation, similarly with Red, White, and Royal Blue, I wanted more, and that is why I picked up the books. The Heartstopper series is very obviously originally a webcomic. You can tell through the more unpolished style of it, and it took me a while to get used to that, but I was very quickly charmed by the books. So I talked somewhat about the differences from the TV adaptation in comparison to the books in one of my previous videos, but I think the major difference is the focal point. So the books are very much focusing on Nick and Charlie. Charlie's kind of a nerd. He's really intelligent, but he's good at everything, and he's slightly more quiet, slightly more introverted, and hangs out with the outcasts. So he's one of the outcasts of the school. Whereas Nick is very popular, he's a jock, he's good looking, he's liked by everyone. So it's kind of an unlikely friendship because they sit next to each other in one of their classes, and the friendship eventually develops into a romance. What I enjoyed about these books most is seeing Nick's perspective and how he is observing Charlie. Because even though you definitely see how he's interested in Charlie and how he cares for him, I think you can see the attraction much earlier on in the books and see how he's already attracted to him way before he mentions anything about it. Way before he acts on it, and I liked that. I liked seeing that it was a mutual feeling, that it wasn't just Charlie being in love with Nick, but that they both were really drawn to each other before they actually had a relationship. And similarly, I really like seeing Nick observing Charlie and discovering some of his destructive habits, which I feel like is kind of, it's not really present in the TV adaptation. Even though Nick does start to notice, it isn't as gradual as it is in the books, and the eating disorder or the disordered eating is much more obvious in the books, and I really appreciated that. So really enjoying the books. If you have not read these yet, I would definitely recommend them. I am going to be reading the 4th volume, like I said. Now I've just started it, and I also have the 5th volume to pick up from the library next week. So very excited to be caught up to the publication, because the 5th just came out. So my battery died, it's the next day, we're just going to continue on, hopefully at a slightly more rapid pace. So I left off with the picture books that I read in December that were both Christmas themed. One of them was Jultröjan by Cecilia Heikkilä. I've read another book by her that I prefer to this one. This is one of her earlier works that she both wrote and illustrated herself, and I think it was meant to be one of those pixie books that is meant for young children. So the story is quite simple. It's about finding camaraderie and friends around Christmas, around the Christmas time. It's beautifully illustrated. I love her illustration style, but I didn't enjoy the story as much. I think, as I said, it's one of her earlier works, and I think later in her career there's more depth and nuance that is as enjoyable to read as an adult reader as I think for children to read. But the other picture book was really successful for me, and that is Mamamoo och Kråkans jul. It's written by Julia Wislander and illustrated by Sven Nordqvist. This team has done all of the Mamamoo books, and I absolutely love them. I've read them as a kid, and they were part of the reason I got into reading in the first place. This particular one I hadn't read before, and I think it might be one of my favorites. Mamamoo is a character that is a cow, and she is never stopping to do what is expected of her. She always does the things that she wants to do. Often she is breaking the norms in different ways and just breaking boundaries, doing what she wants to do. And in this particular book, it's focusing on her friendship with a crow that is also a side character in all of the books. And the crow isn't really that excited about Christmas coming around because he never gets any gifts. And so she decides to throw him a surprise party, or create a surprise for him. And I think it captures the sense of giving and of true love in seeing what the other person needs and wants the most, being there for another person in that way. I thought it was beautiful. Would strongly recommend all of the series. It's, like I said, a picture book series that is close to my heart, and this one in particular was just a standout. Next we have Nails and Eyes by Kaori Fujino. This has been translated by Kendall Hatesman, and this is a collection of a novella and 2 short stories, if I'm remembering correctly. I'll be honest and say that I don't remember the short stories. I do remember the atmosphere of all of the stories in this book, but the short stories hasn't really lingered in my memory. But the novella is very unsettling, and I think the ending of it I will remember for a long time, similar to how I feel about How I Became a Nun by Cesar Era. So it's about a woman who has an affair with a married man, and he has a daughter. His wife dies suddenly, and it's a lot about the daughter's relationship with this woman that is the husband's lover, and she moves in with them. So there's that very strange triangle of these 3 characters and the relationships between them, and as I said, in particular the woman and the child. And the child is struggling with dealing with her grief after her mother has died, and it's one of those stories that is, at first it seems like everything is fairly normal, or realistic at least, and then it grows more and more unsettling and warping, and it's very uncomfortable. And I thought the atmosphere of this and the way that the tension just slowly builds up was fantastically done. I've read good short stories like this, or stories that have this particular sense of dread. It reminded me of the stories by Amparo something. I will put a picture of the book that I'm thinking of on the screen. That sense of the tension and the atmosphere, that at first everything seems fairly normal, but there's an edge to everything. That is very much what was present in Nails and Eyes. So would recommend the novella in particular. Next we have Autumn by Ali Smith. I did this as a buddy read with Oliver and with Amelia, and it was a really interesting buddy read. We all had different perspectives coming into this book. For me it was a reread, and I'd originally given it 3 stars, so I was kind of lukewarm about it. I liked certain aspects of it but didn't love it, and I have not read any other Ali Smith since then, so it was the first one I read, and I haven't been keen to read more until very recently when I heard about the companion piece book that is it's related to the seasonal quartet, and so I wanted to read that, but I am reading through the seasonal quartet now before I get to companion piece, and I ended up actually really enjoying Autumn. I think the stylistic style of Ali Smith is something that I haven't quite gotten used to, and it doesn't always work for me, but sometimes it just hits the nail on the head perfectly. And the themes of Brexit in this in particular, and the way she talks about borders in different ways, both physical and metaphysical, it just hit me in a different way this time, and I think might be because of hindsight and just having that space from this particular point in time that the book came out and that it is mirroring. So definitely a really interesting reread that made me think of the book in a new way. The book is following Elizabeth as an adult, and we also get flashbacks from when she was a kid and her getting to know her neighbor Daniel. And I didn't enjoy his sections as much, in particular the ones directly from his point of view and going back in time. Those were the only things that I didn't really enjoy in this book. But overall, I think especially the thematic aspects of the book I did really enjoy on a second read through. And especially also, it's always fun to do a book like this as a buddy read, to get different perspectives and things to think about. The next one I have is In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. It is a memoir told through flash nonfiction, mini essays. It's unusual in the structure of it, and it's sort of centering around the dream house as a physical space and as a idea. And it's very much about domestic abuse and control of the narrative, and storytelling is very central to the book, both in the way that she plays with a narrative structure and borders and framing, as well as thematically related to the domestic abuse and framing those experiences. It was just beautifully done. So thought-provoking. I love the way she weaves in elements of fairy tale and other cultural references. The way she talks about her own experiences, very intimate memories and stories, as well as putting it into a larger context of queer history. So if there's any book that I wanted to recommend especially, it's probably going to be this one from this video. But I'll talk more about it in my favorite books of the year. Spoiler, but there you go. The last one I have is Det Blå Garnet by Karin Erlandsson. This I finished on this last day of 2023, so when I'm recording is the 1st of January. And it's a Swedish book about knitting history. It's also a memoir. To a certain extent, it's the author talking about knitting history as a whole, but also her own knitting history. While I enjoy the memoir aspects and when she talks about different projects that she's taking up and the things that she's learning, what I enjoyed the most about this was the general history of knitting as a tradition in different places, in different techniques that have come about through very practical reasons. There's just so much about the knitting history that is completely loaded with information that I didn't know, and that I've been scribbling down all of these things in my journal, in my commonplace book, because there's just so much that I've learned through reading this. I don't think it has an English translation. When or if it gets one, I will definitely share it with you. It was a fantastic way to end the year with just a really purely enjoyable, very much of a particular interest to me, nonfiction. So those are all of the books that I wanted to talk about in this catch-up wrap-up. Quite a long one, probably. And yeah, it's good that I can finally let go of 2023 and look ahead for 2024. I would love to know if you've read any of the books that I talked about in this video. What did you think of them? What were your favorite books of 2023? If you haven't made a favorite books video, or if you're not planning to make one, I would love to hear about that in the comments. And yeah, I think that was all I wanted to say. I hope you've had a fantastic new year and a good start to 2024, and I will talk to you soon.